feels very bad at the moment, doesn't it? No one can afford to eat or heat and cool their homes. There are so many wars going on that most of them barely even register in the news anymore. And we're sleepwalking into a climate and biodiversity crisis that amounts to the world's sixth mass extinction. But it doesn't have to be like this, and a new report shows us a way out. This new report by the World Inequality Lab says that we can raise living standards, reduce inequality, and limit warming to less than 2 degrees Celsius. Sounds too good to be true, but they show us exactly how it's possible. Now, it's early, but I think the word of the year is going to be polycrisis. Wars, cost of living crisis, biodiversity loss, climate heating, inequality, political extremism. So many things, and I could go on. The authors of this report came up with a radical approach to these polycrises. It's not actually even that radical if we start to dissect it, but in the context of current events and current politics, it seems very radical. And it involves decarbonising our energy systems, stopping consuming stuff we don't need, taxing billionaires to reduce inequality, increasing everyone's quality of life across the world, and funding the environmental protections we need. Now, if we follow their plan, we will achieve equality between countries, we'll work less and have more free time, everyone will have universal access to healthcare and education, we'll have full gender equality, we'll have reduced inequality within societies, we'll have a world cooler than 2 degrees above pre-industrial with all the lives saved that entails, and we'll have global democracy. Like, where do I sign? Yes, now, please. Central theme here is sufficiency. This idea that we don't need to just endlessly consume to live healthy, prosperous, and meaningful lives. Obviously, that's something that's missing from our current very consumerist and capitalistic society. The report's authors offer a step-by-step guide to achieving this, and the first step is to work less. So we'd be, each of us, working around a 2.5-day working week. We'd need to cut dramatically the amount of red meat that gets consumed, and that would mean less deforestation, less ecological destruction, less greenhouse gas emissions, probably better health for the people that are currently consuming quite a lot of red meat. We'd also need to refocus our economies towards lower consumption activities, and that's things like education and healthcare. We'd need to increase the spending on those kinds of parts of society rather than manufacturing in other places. We could tackle the climate crisis by cutting our emissions to net zero. And finally, we would need to tackle inequality by taxing the super rich who are most responsible for the climate crisis. Across the world, the average national income would rise to around 5,000 euros a month. And that's an increase for nearly everyone except the mega rich and the richest people in the richest countries. I'd be really happy with 5,000 euros a month, as I'm sure probably most of you would be too. But I currently don't get paid quite that much, and that means that making these videos is only possible because of my patrons, my Patreon supporters. And if you are one of them, then huge thank you. I really appreciate the support. And if you're not, then please do consider supporting over on Patreon. If you value these videos, it's the way that I finance this channel. It's the way I can decide to spend more time working on these videos and bringing you the most evidence-based and the best videos that I can about topics that really do matter. So if you do value the videos, then please do consider supporting the channel over on Patreon. I will stick a link somewhere over here. But now, let's go back to those steps and dig into each one in a little bit more detail. Now, the first one is working less. This report showcases the sort of pathway to achieving this vision of the future that I really want, and I'm assuming most of you also think sounds pretty good. But it means that by 2100, so the end of this century, in another 74 years, we are going to see the following. So by 2100, in this report, it shows that men and women will need to be doing the same amount of domestic and economic labour. And that means that men and women are doing the same amount of caring. It means that men and women are doing the same amount of domestic versus economic, and it means that everyone's doing the same amount of work. And also everyone's working hours decline on average. It's actually kind of what we've seen in Sweden and Norway with the sort of revaluing of different types of labour. And this all hinges on the valuing of caring responsibilities, the valuing of domestic labour essentially as work. And this is especially true in an ageing population, because as we get older, we need more people to care for us. And that's only going to get worse because our societies continue to age. Also, because historically most of those caring responsibilities have fallen on women, and particularly on marginalised women, that means that it's creating a level of equality across society that addresses multiple different challenges. What we need for that is to achieve equal benefits, and that means things like equal parental leave for both parents, equal promotion opportunities, equal pay for equal work, and to achieve gender parity in employment. None of those sound outrageous to me. In fact, they all sound like the absolute bare minimum in a functional democratic society. And overall, it means that we're working less by 2100, and rather than the traditional developed world kind of idea of 40 hours a week, it's more like 1,200 hours a year, and that's something like 2.5 days work a year. And that's creates so much more time for leisure, so much more time for connection with our environment, connection with each other, for looking after each other, for being creative, for doing things that bring us joy and value and meaning and connection, rather than making money for companies to make stuff that we don't need. Now, the next step is to reduce the consumption of red meat. And this might seem a bit too specific, but red meat is the most polluting of all the foods. A lot of it is to do with the fact that rainforest gets cut down to have grazing ground for cattle, and that's for beef production, but also to a lesser extent for dairy, because lots of dairy herds get kept in smaller amounts of space. And if you want to see a little bit more about some of the detailed digging into that, then I did a video about it, which I'll stick up here. Now, that dramatic shift away from eating so much red meat and other polluting food items would allow us later in the century to completely ban deforestation, and then later start reforesting to achieve the same levels of forest cover that we had in 1900. And that would restore lots of natural environments and allow us to have a better relationship with our environment. The next step is to push the economy towards low consumption activities and away from high consumption activities. And every euro of GDP, so gross domestic product, kind of measure of the productivity of an economy in economic terms, every euro of GDP in education and health has 4 times less impact than a euro of GDP in manufacturing. That's because, well, learning is free, caring is free, and if you make the structures that facilitate that learning and caring, then you have much smaller output of pollution as a society. And that means we can spend more on arts, on culture, on education, on health, on services, and much less spending on manufacturing and food production. And a lot of that food production part comes from just moving away from red meat and dairy and more polluting food products. And of course, because we're working less, we have more time for leisure activities, hanging out with friends, spending time with family, chilling out in nature, playing sports, making art, watching plays, learning skills. And to be honest, that sounds great. I'd much rather work less and play more. The next piece of the puzzle is to reduce inequality. Now, currently, billionaires make up 0.001% of the global population, but they control 6% of the world's wealth. And that means they've got 6,000 times more wealth each than their fair share. 6,000! Now, the report suggests taxing these people so their share falls to 0.05%, and that is still 50 times their fair share, by the way. But that would allow the lowest earning half of the world's population to increase their share of wealth from 2%, where it currently is, to 30%, which is a huge improvement. Now, the global rich are historically and currently responsible for the lion's share of warming today, and the more you earn and consume, the more you emit. It's a pretty simple relationship. And it's also quite hard even to comprehend like how much money some of these people have in relation to what an ordinary person has. Like what you consider rich is probably not even close. And on the global scale, 89% of people would see their annual income more than double between now and 2100, versus only 2% who would see it decline. But in poorer parts of the world, 99% of the population would see their income increase. Pretty universally a good story. And the people who are the richest, they're still going to have enough to survive. It's not going to be a problem. Nobody needs a super yacht. Now, the final piece of that puzzle is to tackle climate change. And you can take the money you got from taxing the rich, invest it in wind, in solar, in renewable tech, to completely electrify and decarbonize energy supplies by 2050. And the savings that we would make from cutting the number of days worked and changing our diets would also reduce that amount of carbon pollution. Stopping deforestation and restoring natural habitats and ecosystems would also help to address this problem. And by cutting fossil fuel consumption to 1/5 of energy demand by 2050 and to 0 by 2100 would achieve, or go a long way to achieving, this reduction in our planetary emissions and therefore preventing the amount of warming rising above 2 degrees above pre-industrial. All of these things sound really great, but I can hear you screaming through the screens at me, it all requires money. And you're right. Because to achieve this, they propose establishing a global justice fund, which would collect taxes from income and wealth, so what you earn, but also what you already have, to ensure equality, or equity is probably the better word. Now, this fund would be used to pay out dividends to nations in an equitable way that ensures the poorest people in the world see rapid and considerable increases in their quality of life and well-being, and the richest 0.001% are finally taxed for all the wealth they've been hoarding. Now, this would be done with a global sovereign wealth fund as well, which would channel investments into sustainable assets, and it would allow more sustainable development and financing to reduce emissions, to restore nature, to increase public access to health and education, and to achieve global economic justice. And this plan would supposedly limit warming to 1.8 degrees above pre-industrial by the end of the century. And that's actually the most optimistic IPCC scenario. And that's the kind of transformational change that is required to achieve that best case scenario. Not just geophysically, which is what I often end up falling back on this channel, because sure, 1.5 degrees, geophysically possible. Politically, yeah, right. But the authors say that this version of the future is plausible. They say that working hours have halved in Europe since the 19th century, and that's a decrease that's in line with what they're saying in this report. And we also know what we need to do. Crucially though, those green policies have to tackle inequality, because as we're seeing across the globe, there has to be support for people to improve their quality of life if they're struggling. And all of us need to improve our quality of life, our well-being. We can't let the super rich hoard all of our resources at our own expense. And if you're making the working class and the middle class poorer, you're not going to have support for your green policies. It has to tackle inequality. Fundamentally, if you do not improve people's quality of life, then you are not going to have support for green policies. And this is exactly what we're seeing with the resistance to net zero in the UK, the rise of reform, the rise of the far right, really pushing back against green, climate-friendly policy. And the same is happening in the USA, it's happening across Europe, it's happening across the world. We're seeing more resistance to environmental policies because they are being portrayed as being anti-working class, anti the working person. It doesn't have to be like that. It's not mutually exclusive. And just take 1 minute to just imagine. Just imagine if we could make things better. We could. It's within reach. I can already preempt the comments telling me I'm too optimistic or whatever, because I always get them. And people conflate enthusiasm with optimism. But anyway, my point is, we can't do something better if we don't allow ourselves to imagine an alternative. If we don't, we are totally stuck. If we throw our hands up and say, I give up, there's no point, we're already siloed, we're already divided, then we've lost. And we cannot let people force us to stay divided, to stay unconnected. Now, I'm not naive to the fact that this is a colossal challenge. I spent my career looking at climate data. I know how big a challenge this is, and I'm actually reasonably fatalistic about climate change, I would say. Yes, people can behave selfishly. Yes, our leaders do behave like psychopaths often. But humans crave connection, humans crave meaning, and we can build an alternative future if we just take that first step of imagining the alternative. And something that was quoted in The Guardian on this coverage is a quote from Jason Hickel, who's a professor at the Autonomous University of Barcelona and a visiting senior fellow at LSE. And Jason said, "It's an important and timely intervention. All of this is technically feasible to achieve. We can have good lives for all within planetary boundaries, but it will require organised political struggle to make it happen." And this sits with me because, first, we have the technology. It is technically feasible. We know what we need to do. It's possible for everyone to live a good life and for us not to completely destroy our one and only home planet. But we need to get together. We need to organise. We need to push for that change that we need to see. And I think we're always saying that to tackle climate change meaningfully, to actually tackle climate change, we need a transformational upheaval in the way we do things. Hasn't every major historical revolution required transformational change? It's always required collective action. And isn't this it? Isn't this the moment we were waiting for? Isn't this the transformational upheaval that we need? Because, yeah, another world is possible. Why can't we just make it happen? So I guess I'm finishing by saying, get organised and join up with other members of your community. Find each other here, find each other in the comments or on my Patreon, or look up your local groups and band together with your mates and your neighbours and your community. But whatever you do, connect with other people, because alone we stay in the dark and we can't achieve much on our own as individuals. We are so much stronger together, and it's only when we work together that we can actually change things on the big scale. So, good luck.